She was lying on behalf of the President of the United States. This is a photograph from just one day along the Rio Grande of hundreds of thousands of people walking across the border. You have allowed this to happen. The photograph that was before, what are these wristbands?
I don't know what they are.
You don't know what they are. Mr. Secretary, you have just testified to the American people you're incompetent at your job, because I've been to the southern border, and if you go to the southern border, along the southern border, you see thousands of these wristbands because the illegal immigrants wear them. The drug cartels, every color corresponds to how many thousands of dollars they owe the cartels. You have turned these cartels into multi-billion-dollar criminal organizations, and these are modern-day leg irons because these are children being sold into sex slavery, and you don't even know what they are. That is astonishing. Mr. Secretary, how many children have been sold into sex slavery under your administration?
Senator, we are taking it to the cartels.
How many children have been sold into sex slavery? Do you know how many children have been sold into sex slavery?
To an unprecedented degree.
Mr. Secretary, I want to say to you right now, your behavior is disgraceful, and the deaths, the children assaulted, the children raped, they are at your feet, and if you had integrity, you would resign.
Attorney General Garland, on October 4th, you issued an unprecedented memo that involves the Department of Justice and the FBI and local school districts, local school boards, nothing like it in our country's history. It was based, you've testified, on this letter from the National School Board Association that we now know the White House was involved in writing. They've retracted the letter. They've apologized for the letter. They say they regret the letter, but you won't retract the memo and said earlier that you have no regrets. And you've defended yourself repeatedly today before this committee by saying, well, you're focused on violence. But now, of course, we've seen the memo from your own Justice Department advising state and local and other prosecutors about all of the different federal causes of action that they can bring against parents that are not about violence, they're about harassment and intimidation. I'm looking here at this memo. It identifies no fewer than 13 possible federal crimes involving harassment and intimidation, including making annoying phone calls. Do you think a parent who makes a phone call to a school board member that she has elected, that school board member deems annoying, should be prosecuted, General Garland?
No, I don't. And the Supreme Court has made quite clear that the word intimidation with respect to the constitutional protection is one that directs a threat to a person with the intent of placing the victim in fear of bodily harm or death. Prosecutors who investigate these cases know the Supreme Court's. This is a very famous leading case.
Prosecutors do, but parents don't, General Garland. Do you think that a parent who looks at the 13 different federal crimes that your Justice Department has identified they might be subject to and prosecuted for, like making annoying phone calls, do you think that they're going to feel that they're welcome to speak up at a school board meeting? How about this one? They could be prosecuted for using the internet, I guess that would be Facebook, in a way that might cause emotional distress to a victim. Is that a crime of violence?
Senator, I haven't seen the memo that you're
Why
talking
haven't
about,
you?
and I don't, even from the description, it doesn't sound like it was addressed to parents. But if you
No, it wasn't addressed to parents. It was addressed to prosecutors. That's the problem. Why haven't you seen the memo?
I don't know why I haven't. I don't look at every. I do not get every memo that every U.S. attorney sends out. But if you're
wait a minute. Don't. I just want to be sure I understand this. This is a memorandum that collects 13 different federal crimes parents could be charged with. It has United States Department of Justice on the top of it, and you're telling me you haven't seen it?
Who's the memo from, Senator?
The United States Department of Justice, United States Attorney for the District of Montana.
I have not seen a memo from the District of Montana.
Not high enough priority for you?
It's not. That's not the question. I don't.
It is the question. Answer my question. Is it not a high enough priority for you when you're threatening parents with 13 different federal crimes? These aren't crimes of violence. You've testified today you're focused on violence. That's not what your U.S. attorneys, they work for you. That's not what they're saying. You haven't seen it because it's not a high enough priority, or what?
Question of priority. No one has sent me that memo, so I haven't seen it.
What do you mean no one has sent you the memo? You run the United States Department of Justice, do you not?
There are 115,000 employees of the Department of Justice.
Indeed, and you are in charge of every one of them. And this was a
not
sufficiently important case that you issued a memo. you, over your signature, issued a memo involving the FBI and the Department of Justice in local school boards, local school districts. Your U.S. attorneys are now threatening prosecution with 13 different crimes, but it's not a high enough priority for you. It got lost in the mix.
I'll send again. I've never seen that memo. It wasn't
That's what
sent to me.
concerns me, General Garland.
Well, it wasn't sent to me. I hope you will assure your constituents that what we are concerned about here is violence and threats of violence.
That only leads
That's
me
the
to
best way-
conclude,
that's
General
the best
Garland,
way.
all I can conclude from this is either that you're not in control of your own department, or that, more likely, what I think to be the case, is that you knew full well that this is exactly the kind of thing that would happen. When you issued your memo, when you involved the Department of Justice and all of its resources, and the FBI and all of its resources, in local school boards and local school districts, you knew that federal prosecutors would start collecting crimes that they could use against parents. You knew they would advise state and local officials that these are all of the ways parents might be prosecuted. You knew that that was the likely outcome, and that's exactly what's happened. And we're talking about parents like Scott Smith, who's behind me over my shoulder. This is a father from Loudoun County, Virginia. Here he is at a school board meeting. He was forcibly restrained. He was assaulted. He was arrested. Why? Because he went to an elected school board meeting. He's a voter, by the way. He went to an elected school board meeting to raise the fact that his daughter was assaulted, sexually assaulted, in a girl's restroom by a boy. This is what happened to him. Now, you testified last week before the House that you didn't know anything about this case. I find that extraordinary because the letter that you put so much weight on, the letter that's now been retracted, it cites this case. It cites Mr. Scott's case directly. There's a news article cited in the letter. It's discussed in the letter, but you testified you just couldn't remember it. Maybe this will refresh your memory. Do you think people like Scott Smith, do you think parents who show up to complain about their children being assaulted ought to be treated like this man right here?
Parents who show up to complain about school boards are protected by the First Amendment.
Do you think that they ought to be prosecuted
They
in
are
the different
protected.
ways that your U.S. attorneys are identifying?
If what they're doing is complaining about what the school board is doing, policies, curriculum, anything else that they want to, as long as they're not committing threats of violence, then they should not be prosecuted, and they can't be.
Let me ask you about this. Several of my Democrat colleagues have today, just today in this hearing, multiple times have compared parents who show up at school board meetings, like Mr. Smith here, have compared them to criminal rioters. You think that's right? You think that a parent who shows up at a school board meeting, who has a complaint, who wants to voice that complaint, and maybe she doesn't use exactly the right grammar, you think they're akin to criminal rioters? Do you agree with that?
I do not, and I do not remember any senator here making that comparison.
Oh, really? These people are just like the folks who came here on January 6th and in the riot at the Capitol?
I don't think they were referring to the picture that you're showing there.
Well, I certainly would hope not, but they were referring to parents who go to school board meetings. Mr. Smith is a parent who went to a school board meeting. I'll leave it at this, General Garland. You have weaponized the FBI and the Department of Justice. Your U.S. attorneys are now collecting and cataloging all the ways that they might prosecute parents like Mr. Smith because they want to be involved in their children's education and they want to have a say in their elected officials. It's wrong. It is unprecedented, to my knowledge, in the history of this country, and I call on you to resign here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This phone app allows, and I'm going to quote from your own fact sheet, it allows, and I quote, non-citizens without appropriate documents for admission to schedule an appointment to come to the border. They can now go on their phone and schedule a time to come to the border and then be admitted. And you identified 7 separate border points of entry where they could come. 5 of them in Texas, 2 of them in California, 1 in Arizona. It's like a concierge service for illegal immigrants. My question is, you didn't think the border crisis was bad enough that now we're going to have an app that allows illegals to schedule their appointments and come and be admitted to this country?
Senator, you're mischaracterizing the use of the application. Let me explain it to you. We are currently enforcing the public health order of Title 42, and I know you're very familiar with it. There is a process for individuals who claim an exception to the Title 42 expulsion authority because of an acute medical condition.
Well, let's talk about
An
this
urgent-
app.
If I may finish, an urgent humanitarian reason. So instead of them coming in between the ports of entry to claim that urgent medical condition, that extraordinarily acute humanitarian cause. We allow a limited number to arrive at our ports of entry and seek the emergency relief that they need.
Schedule, you allow them, let's be particular about
And
what
I
you
should
do.
say that the CBP One app was not unveiled for the first time on January 5th of this year.
Oh, no, but you changed it. You made it available on January 5th to the illegals themselves. You don't have to be a lawyer to use it. You don't have to be a member of a non-governmental organization. Anybody can download the app and use it on their phone. And for the first time, you allowed them to schedule appointments. Now, let's talk about what actually happens when they come to the border. It's interesting. You characterized this when you rolled it out as an application for applying for asylum. But nowhere on the app do you actually require the illegal migrants to apply for asylum or to claim asylum or anything about asylum. And in fact, when they then get to the border, you don't ask them questions, you don't do interviews, you just release them. Here's the Texas Monthly, not a notable conservative outlet, who reports, and I quote, "At no point does the app ask users, are you seeking asylum? Those arriving for the CBP One appointments are given no interviews, asked no questions about vulnerabilities that they may or may not have listed in the app or about why they're coming to the United States. They're simply released into the country," end quote. So rather than building a wall, Mr. Secretary, you have built Ticketmaster for illegal immigrants.
You are, Senator, you are conflating programs. Let me explain
Well,
to
just
you.
respond to this. Is it true that they are given no interviews, asked no questions, and simply released into the country?
You what is happening.
Are they given interviews? Let's start with
because
that. Are they given interviews?
We were previously experiencing
That's
almost-
starting to
almost-
sound like a no. Well, let's
almost
just
90
hone in here. Mr.
almost-
Secretary, my time is very limited. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to drive to some clarity here.
But, Senator,
The Texas Monthly has reported that once illegal immigrants go on their phone and reserve their time to come to the border, once they use your concierge service that you've created for them, when they come, they are given no interviews. They are asked no questions about any vulnerabilities. They are simply released into the country. Is that happening?
Senator, you are mistaken. And if I may explain,
Are they given interviews?
if I may explain, individuals who seek parole under our January 5th program for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans are screened and vetted before they arrive at our border.
Wait a minute. No, they go on they go on the phone and they just reserve a time, and then they show up and they're given nothing. Listen to this. Even immigration advocates are amazed about this. Here, also from the Texas Monthly. Here's one immigration advocate whose first name is Orta. She says, that's the crazy part. Nothing in this new program requires you to actually seek asylum. Somehow, we've decided to punish those who arrive at the border without the app, who may be seeking asylum, but we just let in anybody who may or may not have any particular reason to seek asylum, so long as they've made an appointment on your Ticketmaster app. This seems crazy to me. And I tell you what I'm tired of. I've had Secretary Mayorkas sit in front of me in a different committee, the Homeland Security Committee, where I asked him at length about the outrage of 250,000 migrant children unaccompanied, crossing the border in the last 2 years, and tens of thousands of them being sold into slavery. Let's not mince words. They've been sold into slavery. When kids are being put into factories, forced to work overnight, forced to work in terrible conditions, they're not getting paid, they're not going to school, sometimes they're not getting fed, that's slavery. And what I heard from Secretary Mayorkas, don't take my word for it, you go look at the record, read the transcript. What he told me was, oh, it's not my problem. We don't have anything to do with it. Not my problem. Now we have a new report from HHS where they say it's not their problem. Amazing how this works. Nobody's responsible. These kids are literally being sold as slaves in the United States of America in the year 2023, and nobody's responsible. They don't want to come and testify to this committee. You bet they don't. They don't want to be put under oath. They don't want to answer any questions. They don't want cameras here. They don't want to take any responsibility. Well, I tell you, it's somebody's fault. It's not the kid's fault. Thank God for the New York Times, a phrase I never thought would come out of my mouth. But really, I mean, thank the Lord that the New York Times did these series of reports, because otherwise we'd still be fed the lies from this administration that everything is fine and dandy. We know just where the kids are. It's all great. They're all fine. No, it's not. Is it fine that people like Carolina Yuck, who's 15 years old, I apologize to her if I mispronounced her name, she's one of the folks, one of the young women that the New York Times caught up with. What is she doing? Midnight in Grand Rapids, Michigan, a conveyor belt carrying bags of Cheerios past a cluster of young workers. Carolina, every 10 seconds, has to stuff a sealed plastic bag of cereal into a passing yellow carton. It's dangerous work, fast-moving pulleys and gears that had torn off fingers and ripped open a woman's scalp. The factory was full of underage workers like Carolina who'd crossed the southern border by themselves, vulnerable, now spending late nights bent over hazardous machinery in violation of child labor laws. Carolina says, sometimes I get tired and feel sick. Her stomach often hurt. She was unsure if that was because of the lack of sleep, the stress from the incessant roar of the machines, or the worries she had for herself and her family in Guatemala. This is totally, utterly, completely unacceptable.
You no longer prosecute crimes. We're not in the crime business anymore. In other words, we, the government, almost always, and in fact, I'll take out the almost always Democrats, say, given a choice between a violent criminal and an innocent citizen, we, the Democrats, choose the violent criminal. You may say, surely that is hyperbole. No one would be crazy for someone who meets that description to be the U.S. attorney. Well, let's look at her record. First of all, Ms. Rollins, in February, she was very candid that she came into the job of DA as a crusader. Here's what she said, quote, if you want to change the criminal legal system, become a prosecutor. Why? She explains why. Because you have, quote, the power to determine charges and what crimes to decline to prosecute. So that's what Ms. Rollins tells you matters about a prosecutor, the power to say, I won't prosecute these crimes. Well, surely she exercised it with reason and restraint. That's what our Democratic colleagues on this committee are suggesting. Well, let's look in writing, and I will say this document, it is entitled Appendix C, SCDAO, Declination and Diversion Policy. Boy, what an incredibly boring title, designed to mask a horrific policy. I would encourage anyone, look, if you're watching this at home, and let's assume you have political leanings, you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, or if you're a Republican, you're inclined to believe the Republicans on this. If you're a Democrat, you're inclined to believe the Democrats on this. Let me suggest something to you. Go read this document. I'll tweet out this document. Just read it. Read it yourself and then ask who's telling the truth. Because for all the Democrats saying, no, what do you mean she won't prosecute crimes? Let me read from the document she prepared. Charges on the list of 15 should be declined or dismissed pre-arraignment, so even before the proceedings start, without conditions. So we're not going to put any conditions on it. No matter what, just throw it out. We don't want to see these cases. And in fact, the next sentence says the presumption is the charges that fall into this category should always be denied. Always. So no wiggle room of, just in some cases. Always is what she wrote, even when attached to another charge. So if you have a multiple criminal, we just throw out these crimes. Basically, this is the prosecutor saying, I'm the legislature. Those pesky elected legislators that actually voted on the criminal code, I don't care what they say. I am erasing these crimes from the criminal code. Okay, let's see. Listen, there's some dumb laws. You know, maybe what she's erasing, I'll tell you, in Texas, it is still, I believe, a crime. Senator Cornyn may be able to confirm it, to carry wire cutters in your pocket unless they protrude 3 inches or more. Now, that actually goes back to the days of cattle rustling. If you had a prosecutor who says, all right, we're not going to have an aggressive wire cutter in the pocket carrying prosecution unit, I'd be good with that. So maybe the categories of crimes that she says are no longer crimes in my jurisdiction, maybe they're that kind of thing, the stupid things. Well, let's start. What's the first one on the list? Trespass. Okay, I want everyone to think about this. And what's interesting is this is not just in red states. I want the people of Delaware to think about this. the people of Connecticut, the people of Hawaii, the people of California or Georgia. Do you want laws against trespass enforced in your community? Well, according to this individual that the Democrats want to make the top federal prosecutor in the state of Massachusetts, trespass is no longer against the law. Someone comes into your house, onto your property, no biggie, ain't a crime anymore. All right, what else isn't a crime? Shoplifting. You know, all of us have seen the videos, I think exclusively in Democratic cities, of shoplifters brazenly breaking into stores and stealing and stealing and stealing and running out. And why do they do it? They do it, for example, in San Francisco, because you have a prosecutor there who won't prosecute them. So you know what? Hey, I like stores where the price of everything is zero. That'd be a pretty amazing thing. Not very good for the stores, not very good for the community. But this prosecutor says there is no shoplifting. Now, if you want to steal a bunch of stuff, this is your person. If you're actually a small business owner, if you'd like to not have it open season on people breaking into your store and stealing everything in it, that might concern you. What else? Larceny. Larceny is not a crime. Remember, that she said these should always be declined to be prosecuted. Larceny is on the list. What else is on the list? Disorderly conduct disturbing the police. So let me ask you, and the amazing thing is, even in blue states, there are a lot of moms that are not eager to discover that if someone is drunk and screaming and trespassing on their front lawn and urinating and defecating on their front lawn in front of their children and cursing at their kids, that, hey, according to the Democrats, not a crime, won't be prosecuted, and by the way, when that person comes back to your front lawn tomorrow and does it again, it's not a crime tomorrow either. Remember, always decline to prosecute it. So disorderly conduct is apparently not a crime. What else? Receiving stolen property. So it's good news. At least she's analytically complete. The shoplifters can steal everything in the store. They can take it to the fence, and the fence can then take everything in the store. If you believe that theft doesn't matter, that's a great idea. If you believe in actually enforcing the law, that's insane. What else is not a crime under the lawless administration of this supposed district attorney? Driving with a suspended license. Well, listen, that sounds pretty mild. I mean, a suspended license, that's a technical thing, right? What's the most common area typically where people lose their license? For driving drunk. Or do you get your license suspended when you drive drunk? So if driving with a suspended license is not a crime, then apparently it is open season for people who've had their license suspended because they're repeat drunks because they endanger the safety of innocent people, of children. They get in a car and drive, they get pulled over, you don't have a license. Hey, no problem, keep on driving. Let us know when you kill someone when you're drunk next time. What else is not a crime, according to this radical? B&E, which all of us who watch Law and Order knows that stands for breaking and entering, into a vacant property to sleep or escape the cold. Okay, that sounds kind of reasonable. All right, a vacant lot, it's cold, you're going there. All right, that actually on the list, you can understand the reasoning. If it's cold, you're breaking into a vacant lot. I mean, it's vacant, there's not anyone there to be hurt. You can understand that one. And at least she has the good sense to say it's got to be vacant, because that way no innocent people will be hurt, right? Well, what's the next one on the list? B&E into a non-vacant property to sleep or escape the cold. Well, what's a non-vacant property? Like, I don't know, your home? So apparently what she's saying is if it's cold outside, it is no longer a crime for somebody to break into your home, so they can trespass on your property. They can break into your home, they can commit larceny, and apparently sleep in your living room. Now, I want each of you to imagine, look, there's an element of how would you answer one of your constituents if someone is doing this? And the answer from the prosecutor is, we will always dismiss the case. What else won't she prosecute? Wanton or malicious destruction of property. I don't know about you, but wanton and malicious are typically pretty bad. Ain't a crime under her. What else? You could say, well, at least none of these are violent, right? Well, breaking into a non-vacant property, that has the potential for violence. You know what else is not a crime? Threats. You can make a direct threat. You can threaten innocent people. You can threaten children. You can commit threats. Not a crime. What else is not a crime? Minor in possession of alcohol. Kids apparently drink like crazy guys, party when you got it. What else is not a crime? It's not just alcohol. Okay, you got kids with beer. All right, that's not the first time that's ever happened. Well, marijuana possession of marijuana paraphernalia. Okay, you've got some recreational pot. There's some jurisdictions that have legalized that, understand that. Well, but it's just the users, right? It's the low-level guys. Nope. What's the next one they don't prosecute? Possession with intent to distribute. So if you're a drug dealer, get yourself to Massachusetts. You know, it used to be that you had to pay off a prosecutor and have a corrupt prosecutor on the payroll to get out of jail. Now you've got someone who's just openly saying, drug dealers, come to Massachusetts because we don't prosecute people for possession with intent to distribute. And by the way, you might say, well, it's just marijuana. There are a lot of places that say marijuana is not too bad. Well, what's the next one on the list? Non-marijuana drug possession. So, could be pot, could be, I haven't studied the details of that crime, but I'm assuming non-marijuana drug possession includes heroin, includes crack, includes cocaine, includes fentanyl, PCP, LSD, all of those. Hey, if you got kids, a lot of us on this committee have kids, I don't know, I would be kind of dismayed by a prosecutor who says if there's a drug dealer in my kid's school with a backpack full of fentanyl selling it to other kids, we're not going to prosecute him. But apparently the Democrats on this committee are not dismayed. And by the way, on the question of do you support cops or not, the last one on this list is really incredibly revealing. Resisting arrest. Police officer goes, confronts someone who's violent. They're violent. They engage with them. They resist arrest. What's the prosecutor say? Man, it really stinks to be you. I'm sorry you chose to be a cop, but it's open season. Apparently, resisting arrest is now the standard way of interacting with the police in Massachusetts. This is lunacy. And by the way, to make clear that her policy of not prosecuting anything is consistent with her advocacy of abolishing the police, here's what she said at an earlier public gathering. Rollins also spoke about the much-discussed concept of defunding the police. Okay, let's find out. Where is she on defunding the police? She said that defund is not the verb she would use. Okay, that's good. I'm sure every Democratic talking point is going to take that portion of the statement. She wouldn't use the verb defund, but rather reimagine. Okay, reimagine may be good, may be bad, hard to tell, or reallocate. Now, anyone who knows anything about defund means take the money out of, get away their funding. Reallocate means take the money away, get away their funding. And she explains, she elaborates on this. I think we're asking the police to do far too much. I think we can reimagine and reallocate some funding, take money away from the cops. Those are her views, and I'll give you, in your experience, is there a difference between women and men?
Of course. I think we learned this at a very young age, watching even 12 and unders play. Going through puberty causes irreversible advantage, that no matter the training, no matter the diet, no matter any alterable change you can make, will overcome that male advantage. Especially in sports like swimming, where lung capacity matters so much. Even something as silly as throat size, men have on average a 40% larger throat, which sounds like it's nothing, but when you're grasping for air, that 40% larger throat makes a huge difference in athletic success, not to mention height. You guys know the differences.
Ms. Robinson, do you agree with Ms. Gaines that there's a difference between women and men?
If the question is about trans women,
I'm just asking, is there a difference between women and men?
what I can say is that the NCAA has rules in place. They've had rules in place for the last decade, and when this competition
Okay, I'm
happened,
going to try again.
the rules were clear.
Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? It's a yes/no question. Do you believe there's a difference?
Oh, I think that we're talking about this case with the NCAA.
No, I'm asking a question. Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? Most people could answer this very simply. I'm curious if you're willing to do so.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just putting it into the context of the
Is that a yes?
conversation that we're having. I think that there are definitions related to sex.
Is
but
that
I
a
also
yes?
think
So I'm
that when
trying to
we're-
get a yes or no. I'm not trying to get a speech.
I'm
Is there a difference between women and men?
I think that there are definitions for biological sex.
Okay, so you're
which
not
is
answering
different
that.
than
Let me ask
gender.
you this question then. Why do women's sports exist? If you can't define a difference between women and men, why not abolish women's sports and just tell little girls to swim with little boys and see who wins?
Oh, I'm simply saying that that sex
My
is different
question,
than gender.
why
and I do
do-
believe
why
that
do
women's sports have a great
exist?
value. I mean, Senator, I'll tell you right
Ms.
now.
Robinson, please answer the question I'm asking you.
Absolutely.
Why do women's sports exist?
I think that there are so many positive benefits to sports.
But
I mean,
why have a
we've talked
separate
about it here
category for
today.
women? If there's no difference between women and men, why to have women's sports?
I'm saying that there's a difference between sex and gender, and that the NCAA has rules in place, which they have for the last decade.
Mr. Chairman,
which
I
determine
would
that
like to enter into
related
the
to
record an
participation.
article from Duke Law called Comparing Athletic Performances for the Best Elite Women to Boys and Men. And it goes through